here. We're joined here today to celebrate chess. That sounds incredibly cheesy. But anyway, today we will be speaking about the opening. Everything you need to know about the opening, the do's, the don'ts, some cheat sheet to chess. I would have definitely promoted that line in particular, but of course, it just sounds wrong. Although these are just quick and easy things to remember in the opening. Of course, we're going to use some demonstrative games. We have Tarrasch, Siebert, Sigbert. Oh my gosh, you're probably going to shout me for my pronunciation once again. Versus Romberg. We have Aaron Nimzovich versus Tartakover. Paul Morphy. Last week we took a look at Paul Morphy versus Alonso Morphy. Paul played white pieces with rook odds, and again we see rook odds. So if you spot a position without a rook on it, don't see it as a glitch, but rather as Paul Morphy was so strong that he could play a game of chess without a rook, which is great. Versus NN. So no name. And then, of course, we will just take a look at some, we'll cover some ground that we haven't covered yet. But when we leave here, I'm going to make sure that you can play the best opening you possibly can. And no matter the theory out there, it's so important to go back to the basics sometimes, because even in some theory, if you, maybe your opponent doesn't play what you expect them to play, but it doesn't really matter, because when you get into a position you've never seen before, unfamiliar as it is, it's important to go back to the basics. So that is what we're here to do. Hey, Calvin and Sabin, Cappy and Dave. Good to see you guys. I'm really happy that you're here and I hope you're ready to learn. The first game I really want to show you is this Sigbert Tarrasch. We all know Tarrasch. There's Tarrasch with d4 on the board. So I think there's one Tarrasch. I don't know why there are multiple Tarraschs. Okay, e3, e6, and then c4, c5, something like this. This would be considered Tarrasch. And then you also get the Tarrasch in the French, which is like this. Oops, knight d2. Okay, picture a rook on a1, of course. Knight d2 and we get the Tarrasch again. But like I said, no matter the theory, no matter how fancy it is, if you stick to the opening principles, you should be good to go. So what are the opening principles? Well, before we jump straight into the game, we're going to talk about the first 3 things you need to know in an opening before you even start the game. Number 1, control the center. When you control the center, you control the game. So, of course, there are 4 squares in the center, 2 in black's camp, 2 in white's camp, namely e4, d4, e5, d5. And when you occupy the center with a pawn, which is probably the best piece to occupy the center with in the beginning, in order of importance, at least according to me, I would believe that the best center is pawn center, followed by a knight, then a bishop, rook, queen, king. In the endgame, you want to get your king to the center, naturally, because in the endgame, a king becomes an attacking piece. And although you may think, yes, the king is indeed priceless, but in the endgame, we actually give value to the piece, and the king would be considered to be worth 4 points in the endgame. Yeah. Ready to learn. I'm very happy to hear that. Okay, so control the center. And how are we going to control the center? And we have here the first move that was played in the game. Tarrasch decided on e4. And then principle number 2. So we'll make a move for black as well, e5. And principle number 2 is developing your minor pieces. Initially, I would have said develop your pieces, but pieces could literally mean anything. Although I wouldn't consider a pawn a piece, a pawn is a pawn. And there was one book that I read, 50 Lessons, I can't remember. I have the physical hard copy book, and one of the chapters in the book, I want to actually run and get this book. I'm going to get the book. Don't judge me. Right, so this book is called 40 Lessons for the Club Player by Alexander Kostyev. Kostyev? Okay, let me show you. There we go. And in the book, I sincerely hope I wasn't wrong, there's a chapter in here called, if it's not this book, I'll be so sad. Alright, it's probably not the book, but there are a lot of valuable lessons in this book as well. A pawn is a pawn is a pawn. And to consider, there are pawns, major pieces, minor pieces, and then the king. Minor pieces would be the knights and bishops. Major pieces would be, I'm going to highlight the square anyway, even though there's no rook on it. The rooks and the queen. Then we have the king, being the heart of the board. You eat the rook? Oh my goodness. Didn't go to law school, so I can't judge anyone. Fair enough. Preparing not to judge. That's good. That's good. I swear it was this book. But otherwise, it must have been a book that I borrowed from someone. And when they took it back, I cried tears of sadness. Maybe it was along the line of like the same series of books. Nonetheless, I will go cry in a corner. Alright, so we have a multicolored back row over there. So it's important to note the second principle in the opening is developing the minor pieces, right? So minor piece, and let's see what Tarash decided to play. Knight f3. Of course, in this position, you're not going to play a move like Queen h5, you're not going to play a move like Queen f3. It's your major piece, and the reason you don't bring out your major pieces first is because they're prone to attack, rarely quickly, too. Your opponent could play something like a knight f6, and then you continue normally, and I'm just showing you some random example of what I mean here. We get bishop g4, and suddenly them minor pieces are attacking our major pieces, and it's our fault. We have to leave our major pieces as the last pieces to develop in the opening. Going to good evening, Chest Open. Someone must have ripped the chapter out. Honestly, I think it wasn't this book. It was a purple book, not a blue one. Colorblind. Chandan, this game played without a rook. Yeah, so this game was played without a rook. Like I said, Tarash and Paul Morphy, they were seen as too strong, so they played rook odds, obviously. So we have knight f3 on the board, knight c6, and then d4. Then again, controlling the center is so important. There is a big reason why we don't play moves like a4 and h4 right in the beginning. Number one, it doesn't control the center. The center is pretty much the root of all attack. I mean, a tree cannot, this is going to be a terrible analogy, so do excuse me. A tree cannot grow without roots. It will just collapse completely. You could push it and it will fall. That's why when you develop your pieces, your attack or any potential attack needs to stem from the center. When you control the center, you're welcome to attack on the queen side, you're welcome to attack on the king side, but if you do not control the center and your opponent is completely dominating, don't expect to be able to attack. So this is where you start, and then you go ahead, right? So the center is your first order of business. If you're playing chess odds, if you don't have a rook, you can still castle on the side you are missing the rook or not. And a car cannot operate without wheels, unless you're driving some hovercraft, in which case, hey future. Wise one, thank you. I wasn't sure, so I covered my tracks before saying it out loud. Anyway, so we have a4 and h4, and we need to avoid these in the opening. Later on during the game, fine. If you want to attack with your pawns on whichever side, that's okay. But we're going to start in the center. Right, so that's why the move that was played was d4. And along with opening principles, I mean, obviously people have found different variations in the opening, and that's why so many openings exist. And this particular one is called the Scotch. And it can become different kinds of the Scotch. So if black takes on d4 with the pawn, let's try and draw an arrow. Like to use a variety of colors. We have red, blue, green, and yellow. And I try to use all of them, inclusive. All right, so e takes d4. Then we have the Scotch, of course, still. And if knight takes, then we have the Scotch game. But if white plays bishop c4 instead, then we have the Scotch gambit, which I played for a few years religiously. Even though it's supposed to be sort of your secret weapon, I used it as my main weapon, unfortunately. Oh, Vila, hey, good to see you. And Mariah. Oh, it's really good to see you guys. Okay, so let's come back. Of course, black decided to capture here on d4 and bishop c4. And Tarash is already my favorite player, right? Bishop c4 and bishop c5. I mean, if we were to talk theory here, there are a number of things that black can do to deal with the Scotch gambit. It becomes really tactical. So usually, if the center opens up early in the game, it becomes very tactical. And what do I mean by tactical? You have to watch out for traps. You have to watch out for early attacks on your king. That's why it's so important to get your king safe, which moves on to the third principle in the opening, which is king safety. So yes, now we are controlling the center, we have developed our pieces, and we need to get the king safe. The most common move played in this position is knight f6. And knight f6 attacks the pawn on e4. And what are we going to do here with white? Yes, castle is the best move. And now, just by giving up one pawn, white was able to complete all three principles, maybe not in its entirety because of the knight and bishop for now, but has been able to achieve this way before black, because black still needs to move the bishop on f8, the pawn on d6 to open up their bishop, give it range, and white's accomplished all of these things already at just a cost of a pawn. And that's why he decides to give the pawn up in the beginning, and that's also why it's okay. So it's like gaining tempo and why we call it the Scotch gambit, gambiting a pawn away. All right. You play the Scotch? What about the Scotch gambit? Hey, Melissa and Burrito. Amadeus. Okay. So knight takes e4, and now we've dropped two pawns. But it's okay, because here white is going to jump in with rook e1, which is going to put a lot of pressure on the e-file, keeping that knight in danger here. Because after d5, okay, d5 is the most common move, and I'm really trying to avoid going into too much depth with opening theory, but I just love the Scotch gambit so much, right? So we have d5, and I think the best move here is bishop takes d5, queen takes d5, and knight c3. But there's also this like crazy sideline that I like. Knight c3. Now, in all of these lines, we are picturing a rook on a1. Please picture a rook on a1, otherwise it's completely lost. Because over here, I have an evaluation bar on the side, and it's completely in black's favor. Naturally so. But Tarash, of course, was just overconfident and overjoyed with just being so strong at chess that any noob who he comes across, he's just going to crush anyway. All right, so knight c3, and I mean, there's theory with d takes c4, and there's theory with d takes c3. What I enjoy most is when someone takes my bishop, even though it seems like the best option here. What would you take with here? Keeping in mind there is a rook on a1. With black pieces, what would you play here? This is my big question. e5 with white instead of... Yes, this is theory. So we'll go back to that in a second. So after e5, the black plays d5, and then bishop b5, but I don't particularly like that line. I guess there's e5, but opening principles first, right? Take the knight? Why would you take the knight? Scotch sidesteps the Rye Lopez. I think Rye Lopez and the Scotch kind of run after the same structural idea, or should I say Guccio Piano, because they want to achieve some c3, d4 at some stage, get the bishop back to b3 or c2, and so on. So Rye Lopez is the quickest way to achieve that. Rook takes knight with check. Immediately? I don't know. Where's the rook? It's rook odds. So this game was rook odds, but we're discussing normal theory. If there were a rook there. Guccio Piano? How would you pronounce it? Alrighty. Let's continue, anyway. Alrighty. So there's pawn takes knight, which is actually the best here for black. It's like much better for black, but even though it's dubious, it's still difficult to figure out over the board if you don't know what you're doing. Bishop takes over here. We have f5, knight g5, and then takes here. And apparently the best move is this. And then if black had to take the rook, making a queen, there's knight f6 checkmate. That's beautiful. And then I think the best move is like taking here and rook takes. Becomes wild. But I had a game in 2014 in Durban, South Africa, playing the World Youth Chess Championship. But of course it was just like an hour flight for me because I am South African. Then it was a very wonderful trip, but would it be nice to participate in my first and only World Youth in a different country? No problem, it was still a lovely event. Okay, and then we also had d takes c4, but then we just have rook takes and bishop e6. Bishop e7 maybe is better. Knight takes d5, knight takes, rook takes. My game continued bishop e6. Knight, knight, rook, queen, bishop g5, f6. Okay, here's a tactic for you. What is the best move in this position for white? What is the best move in this position for white? I think it means silent game. Yeah, the Guccio Piano is the quiet game, exactly. But then you get the Italian. What is the difference between Italian and Guccio Piano? Is that the piano was the slow one, the Italian was the more aggressive c3, d4 immediately, regardless of knight f6. Yeah, queen check. Bishop f7. I will. Copy. Oh my goodness. Funny. Giuoco. Thanks, Mariah. In the French, it doesn't happen. I mean, the French was drilled, pretty much drilled into me when I was 15, 14, and that's all I could learn, right? I didn't have any engine or opening books or anything like that. So what I did was I had an A4 hardcover notebook, and my coach would come over with his like thick opening book, sit down, open it up, and say, write down these lines, learn them. That's all I had. That's all I had. Not that it wasn't available at the time, I just didn't know where to look. Exactly, bishop f6 is actually the best move here, because after takes we have queen here. And then after bishop here, the rook Sorry, we still have a rook on a1. That goes to e1. So that's difficult to solve tactics when not all the pieces are on the board. Imagination is definitely needed. Okay. So if we go back to this position after bishop c4, we had here bishop c5. And this is that line, actually, that you were referring to. So usually play something like c3, and if they take on c3, we have bishop f7, right? It gets really wild, because after king takes, there's queen d5 check, and king goes back to f8. I think there's something wrong with this move. After king e8, there must be queen h5, because g6 takes. But g6 isn't something black wants to play, so king f8 here, and then king e8. And now there's no check. There is a check. No, queen e7 is the move. Or d6. I can't recall. Regardless, we'll chop on c3 and happy days. The king can still castle, but here white is going to avoid exchanging pieces, because the more pieces he has on the board right now, the better it is to attack the king. The black king is obviously weaker, and the main principle, I hope you have your pen and paper with you, is that if you have a safer king than your opponents, you want to avoid exchanges and use your pieces to advantage to try and attack the enemy king. Because of course, yours is safer. Why exchange? But if you're on the receiving end of a big attack and your king is not so safe, you want to eliminate pieces. You want to exchange knight for knight, bishop for bishop, queen for queen, because the fewer pieces there are, the less pressure you're under. So that's the whole point of that over there. So let's go back to... Yeah, so we have bishop here, and I've never seen this move in my life, to be honest with you. There's knight g5. I don't know if this is theory, because what happens after... What in the world is the move here? So knight h6 is the move. Yes, I remember. Knight h6. Oh my gosh. What? Next level visualization? Hi, Giant Pixels. Oh no, is this on Discord? It could be a digital pen and paper as well, Cappy. Yes, exactly. We have a Morphe game later, Twirlex. So I've handpicked 3 different games to demonstrate, and then at some point we'll just stop and randomly talk about it, right? So I also like the Italian Giant Pixel. So here we have Queen h5 and castle. And now what? What will white play? f4. You know, I'm preaching king safety. And then f4 comes along. The main thing that I like to say is that you have to get your king safe before you start attacking. But you, of course, Tarish doesn't have such privilege, or what is the word? Doesn't have such luxury. That's the word. So it doesn't have luxury because of the rook on a1 that's missing. So he's like, why waste a move? Castling. Queen e8. Let me just check something. You will not believe the next move. Hey, Glamdring. I'm Pipette. So here, what is white going to play? And remember the topic of today. Ah, in India it's midnight, I think. Bishop something. What does bishop something mean, Cappy? Imagine it's your move in a real game and you just say to your opponent, you can take one of my bishops and put it anywhere on the board. Go ahead. Bishop something. Thanks for pet. Very nice of you. Bishop f7? It's not a bishop move, I can tell you that much. Rumors. Okay, nice. Thanks, the pet from the Discord post. Pardon me, bishop d2. No, believe it or not, it's castle. It's castle because, of course, we're working on the opening and castling is just so important. And d3 is definitely not a move that's going to cause check. Check. But never mind, right? Because even if there's a check, white is like, I'm still attacking right now, so it's fine. King h1 and taking a knight c3. And yeah, I think white is down... Okay, white is just down a pawn. Joking, 2 pawns, because the 8th pawn of blacks is here. And notice how it is moved 10, and black has moved 1 pawn a bunch of times. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 times sitting on the 7th rank of whites, and d6. Relieving the bishop here, giving it range. What's next? Even I'm curious at this point. What is next? White plays f5. f5, and then we have knight e5, attacking the bishop at c4. Knight e5. And now we're moving kind of into the middle game, and to be honest, I rarely want to admire the tactic at the end, so what I'm going to try and do is identify where that tactic actually begins, and stop there, give you the tactic, and we can move on. Okay, we have king, f6, and bishop g4. Okay, I will stop here. I could go a little further, but what I'm going to do is stop here and allow you guys to figure it out. Now, I'm going to ask you, what is white's plan? It's white to move, and I want more than just one move. So if you give me one move, I want to know the continuation. So for instance, if you play this, what will black play? What will you play? And so on. But since it's a tactic, you have to consider the forceful moves, which we have discussed over the last couple of weeks. And I reiterated because it's so important. Checks, captures, attacking moves, in order. That's what you want to focus on. Knight c7, but what's more important here? Checkmate or material? You have to get your priorities straight. So if you get checkmate, then I mean, you automatically win all your opponent's pieces anyway, and the game is over. What's the whole point of winning material when you can get checkmate? How are there clips in this channel? That's not supposed to exist. Then I don't know who your coach is, Cappy. Tell would have sacked. Well, Mariah, don't speak too quick, right? Trapped bishop. Oh, Glandring. I mean, all of you are just throwing shade on the French, and we haven't even had a French on the board today. I decided that even though there were some games I could have chosen with the Whenever French, decided against it because too much shade would have been thrown. Why aren't you throwing shade on other openings like the Scandinavian? Looking for the checkmate, exactly. So I'm going to give you maybe a minute and you can decide. Exactly, so that's the first move, Divot. Because I'm looking in the YouTube chat as well as the Twitch chat, so you guys can decide what you want to do here. I would never throw shade on Rebecca's opening, don't worry. Nope, Giant Pixels, you're absolutely right. 100%. Alrighty. That is enough time then. First move. And now what? I don't even know if this move works. Yes. Chess to open, you do use that emote afterwards. But to be honest, you're 100% correct. 100%. Queen takes h6. King takes. 96. Check. And how is it check? With the bishop. Discover check. King h5. Is the opening before or after the middle game? After, of course. And I'm completely joking. It's, we know opening is the opening. The beginning of the game. You know, Jirachi. Then we have knight f4. I mean, okay, if you play this, isn't it completely winning for black after this move or this move? This move? And even if you take, I mean, black is up some material. Black is up a rook, because remember he started without a rook. So he has to go for the attack here. We have knight f4, king h6. And I love this, knight e2. So you reposition the knight on e2 to go to g3 later. Okay, let's check here first. Takes, check, come back. Oh. 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 Knight f4. Mate. Love it. Hope you guys enjoyed that. That was beautiful. Back to the opening though, right? That lurking bishop. Exactly, Glamdring. It was expected of you to see it right from the beginning. Yeah, it was a whole mating net. Alright, so here in the next game, we have Aaron Nimzovich versus Saveli Tartakover. I know that we have the Nimzo Indian named after Aaron Nimzovich, and correct me if I'm wrong. And we have the Tartakover, which is also some d4 derivative with... No, I'm thinking about the Trumpowski. Tartakover is an opening as well, right? Fortunately, the rooks are back and we have a normal game, right? Exactly. Which game was it from? So I actually have the dates here. The first one that we took a look at, Taras Rumberg, was 1893, where Taras played rook odds. Now this one is Nimzovich versus Tartakover, 1911. I'm sure some of you were born back then. And the last one is Morphy versus No Name, 1850. So let's begin. E4, E5. Principle number 1. Check. Control the center. Knight F3, Knight C6. Principle number 2. In session. Develop your minor pieces. Minor, knights and bishops. Major, queens and... okay, queen and rooks. Then we have Knight C3 and Knight F6. The 4 knights. Bishop B5, Bishop B4. And here we have some symmetry, mirror image. I could not be more upset. And then we have Knight D4. And this creates an imbalance in the position already, because if knight takes knight, e takes knight, and there would be a different pawn structure here for black. So what does white do? Takes a knight, taking back. And now things get a little weird, I think. Exactly. So we have the move e5. e5. How to evaluate this position? I'm not going to kick my microphone down. It's learnt its lesson. I'm not calling you old, what? No, Rebecca was born in 1910. We don't talk about it though. You don't get chess lessons anywhere else, right? So this is the main place to. It's good to stay. You know, we're all about the knowledge and the banter here. And the Red Bull. Okay, so we have e5 and taking on c3. D takes c3. Now, usually in a position like this, or any position for that matter, when you are capturing with a pawn, you want to always aim towards the center because, like we said, if you want to start an attack, it'd be much better to aim towards the center, have everything as close to the center as possible, which is why we don't play flank moves like the knight to the side and bishop to the side and stuff like that. Okay, bishop to the side, not as bad because a bishop maintains its range no matter where it is, as long as you don't put some pawns in front of it and stop it from being active. Then the knight in the center would be able to move to 8 squares. Knight on the side of the board, of course, you're cutting the number of squares it can move to in half, and it can only move to 4, which is why you keep all your pieces as close to the center as possible. And here, naturally, you would want to take with the b pawn, which aims towards the center. It would be one file closer to the center, but here, of course, Nimzowitsch decided to take with the d pawn, which gained a little bit of tempo here. So tempo over may create some exceptions in opening principles and general principles as well. Excuse me. So the bishop would then be able to go back, but here, okay, it wasn't played. Bishop e7 was played instead, and it opens up the range for this bishop. So what it's done here, taking with the d pawn, opens up the file for the queen, the diagonal for the bishop, and here forces the bishop to move. So we have d takes c3, bishop e7, and taking on f6. Okay. Now the big difference here is white's king is safe, black's king is not safe. So what happens after rook e1? With king f8. King f8. When your king is safer than your opponent's, what is the main rule? Do you remember? Do you remember what I said? Queen Luxana, you changed your name. Or you're not Jinx Bubbles at some stage. C takes b2, probably rook e1 first. If you play bishop e7, I think... Don't you have bishop g5? So after this, rook e1, bishop e7, and bishop g5. Then f6. I feel like this is too dangerous. Maybe there's bishop c4 or something here. What's the best move? What? Oh, we have the same thing as what we discussed previously. So we have takes, and queen h5, completely winning. King f8, and probably queen h6, I'm thinking. I don't know. All right, let's see. I feel bishop c4. Yeah, bishop c4 is good. Threatening queen f7. d5 is just met by bishop takes. So queen e8 seems to be the only move. But now it's completely winning because this is mate. So there's no way to stop that. Eventually get the... We can still call you Queen Bubbles, maybe. Okay, let's come back. That's why bishop e7. But Elwin, you are DZ, right? So king f8, and the principle was I don't like this kind of change. Come back. Yeah, okay. So we have bishop c4, d6, and queen h5. So the aggression continues here, and after g6. Another principle is never push pawns on the side that you're weakest. And here, the black king is not only uncastled, but the rook is also trapped on h8, and you do not want to push pawns on this side because, of course, it causes weaknesses, even if the bishop can go to g7. Renews the threat. So if bishop takes h6 here, just queen f7 mate. Queen d7. Oof, I really like this. Rook g8. Now the question is, what would you play with white? What would you play with white? And after that, so you suggest bishop g7, which is fine. Bishop g7, rook g7, but I need more than just one move from white. But the rook is on e1. Unless you meant rook e8, in which case... No. So we had bishop something and now rook somewhere. Gotcha. Nice. Great stuff. So YouTube chat has it all sorted. You could, but queen would just take giant pixels. Hmm. Okay. Alright, so this is what we have then. Bishop takes, rook takes, and the final move. Drum roll. Bishop f7. Bishop f7 and his opponent just resigns because if queen takes, this leads to queen d8, and after queen e8 checkmate, or there's rook takes and this is mate. So what a glorious finish by Aaron Nimzovich playing against Tartakova. What didn't you say? You said bishop f7. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, very, very nice. All right, so we had this mate and this one. And now we're going on to Paul Morphy, which is another Regards game. So would you mind if I just took all the pieces off and we analyze it that way? Is that fine? If you guys say yes, then we'll go ahead and do that. Versus NN, no names. Yeah. It was a genius indeed. Alright, so we're going to take all the pieces off and we'll continue that way. I'm glad that we've all decided to do that. Yes. Alright, if there was a blindfold feature, I would definitely still not do that. Okay, so we have Paul Morphy playing white pieces, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. And when I went through this game, I actually thought it was the same game we had gone over last week because it ended up being the same opening as well. And what I'm going to do is show you how to play the Italian, what kind of opening principles it follows, and also what happens if they don't allow you to play the Italian if they play an early knight f6, which will then lead to the fried liver attack that poor Morphy played against NN. I thought it was the same game as Alonso, Morphy, where he played his dad rook odds, but it turned out to be a completely different game. But along the lines of like something very similar, where the knight on d5 was lost and so on. Why is the rook? What is the rook? How is the rook? Who is the rook? Morphy often played odds games because he was the best in the world. The invisible rook. Yeah, exactly. He's actually one of the Fantastic Four members. It then became Fantastic Five. Or The Incredibles. Depends what you're into. Okay, so knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6. So what we're going to take a look at first is the Italian. Now, the reason I choose e4 as my main move is because it will allow you p3. He needed a challenge? Sure. So it allows you to castle as soon as possible. We have e4, knight f3, bishop c4 being instant immediate moves. I mean, if you're playing a move like d4, it's going to take you a lot longer to castle short because you still have to bring out the e-pawn or the g-pawn, bringing the bishop out, the knight, and then castle, which is going to delay you by one move. But if you're playing e4, it's a lot easier, and already after move 3, you're able to castle. Of course, in this position, you're either going to play something like knight c3, d3, or knight g5. So not castles yet, but I'm just saying that it does make it a lot easier. So after bishop c4, you're able to castle. But the Italian, it continues with c3. Then knight f6, if you're playing Guccio piano, d3. Otherwise d4, takes, and bishop e4. So it will continue this way. And why I like this so much is because white rarely does have the center here. Bishop d2 and knight c3 are two different moves here you could play. I think there's also a variation where you play e5, d5, bishop e5. Excuse me again. But here, of course, it's not going to show that it's completely equal or anything like that because white just doesn't have a rook. But after d5, bishop b5, and it continues, but I really enjoy just taking the center completely. And I know there's some tactics with this one where it goes like knight c3, knight takes e4, castle, and there are two different variations. So there's bishop takes, and after bishop takes, pawn takes, and if the knight takes on c3, we have queen e1 winning the knight, with check. And then we also have knight takes, pawn takes, and if bishop takes, attacking the rook on a1, we're still picturing that there's like a rook on a1, we have bishop a3, and if the bishop takes the rook, we're going to pretend that the bishop has taken the rook here. There's rook e1 and no way to kind of stop, because even after knight here, there's just rook takes or bishop takes. I think bishop takes is slightly better. Or you can take with the rook. I'm sure it's better to take with the bishop, though. Alrighty, coming back. So there's a lot of tactics there. Or bishop d2, which is a lot safer if you don't want to go into the whole tactical thing. Knight takes, bishop takes, and then bishop takes f7. With after this, you play queen b3, d5, knight e5 check, king e6 and taking. Coming back. Okay, enough of theory. Promise not to jump into too much theory. Then that is the Italian. So here we have bishop c4, knight f6, and then the beautiful fried liver attack with knight g5, threatening f7. The best way to deal with this, of course, there are multiple ways of dealing with it. We have d5, we have bishop c5. I I don't know if knight d4 is often played, but I think it's a variation as well. But d5 is most common with knight and knight a5, but there's also knight takes d5. What jokes are we making in the chat? Has gone quantum. Okay. Oh, yeah, I do that all the time. So if you lose your queen, just pretend you have a queen to make yourself feel better. Sure. Does bishop c5 deal with it? Deal with what? What does it deal with exactly? Exactly. Yeah, so my favorite opening would be... Okay, I like a number of openings. Italian, fried liver, Scotch gambit, French, defense. Yep. And after knight takes, we have knight f7. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I actually got this in an Olympiad game once, where my opponent spent about... I mean, we had an hour and a half on the clock, and she spent almost all her time thinking about it. She had never seen the fried liver in her life. And after playing something like this, she actually moved the king away, and I was able to take on d5. But here, we have king e6, which is the correct move, knight c3, which is the correct continuation here. And now, what I don't like to see black do is knight b4. Knight b4 is quite strong, it attacks on c2, and if you play castle, I guess it's also a bit risky for black because of after castling you have a3. It's a bit, okay, unclear. Knight e7. I think d4 is the main played, most played move here. c6 and bishop g5. h6 takes, takes, and takes. And then we have takes here or castle, I'm not sure. And no, if you're playing rook odds, you cannot long castle. It doesn't work that way. Castle short, c6, king safety. As we've preached many times before, you're not going to relieve the pressure now because since your king is safer than your opponent's king, you're just going to pile the pressure continually. The knight on d5 is not going anywhere. Why take it, right? So we have d4, takes, and rook e1. Already it's completely over because now there's knight takes, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes. If we evaluate the material with the rook, with the rook on a1, white is down a piece. Without the rook on a1, it's still completely winning for black, but white has some attacking chances. As you can see, the king is just kind of floating about at this point. So king moves aside, although I do think bishop d6 is slightly better, much better. Then we have king c7, and it's slightly better for white now. Bishop f4, bishop d6, and now what? What do we play? What do we play? I'm going to stop here. I think I stopped at the right moment as well. In a couple moves, it's completely over. It's not even resignation. It's simply checkmate. We mate. Exactly. At dawn we ride. My bed is made. Why would you say I don't make my bed? This is just a throw. It's meant to be this way. Leave my bed alone. Okay. It's Red Bull. Don't worry. Red Bull edition. What? Queen c5. I like it. It does look good, Lamdrang. Good job. Looks like you can do more than just troll. Yep, so queen c5, king b8, and queen takes, bishop takes. Beautiful stuff. And it's mate, right? And that's the end of that game, which is amazing. All right. Okay. So now that we've taken a look at some really great games, a blast from the past, we had that game from 1850, we had the game with Aaron Nimzovich from 1911, and I'm going to try and remember, the last game was 1890, I'm lying to you, completely lying. Yes, 1893, let's go. 1893. Smothered mate with the bishop. You hardly see that happen. No, that's not a guitar. It's a broomstick. I play Quidditch. I'm joking. It is a guitar, but it's just for aesthetic purposes. For now, I used to play it very poorly though. Okay, so in the opening, what I'm going to try and do, guys, now is address your concerns. So if you have any questions in the opening that you would like me to address, I would be happy to. Other than that, we'll do a recap, summary. I'll give you the last couple tips, and maybe we'll go over a opening trap that I want to show you. King Hand Magic. Oh. Yeah, you're born. Okay, gotcha. Wait, what? You never see it happen with the French bishop, who usually hasn't even put his boots on by the time they continue to throw shade. Okay, I blunder a lot. What can I do to avoid that? So blundering pretty much stems from not being able to see your opponent's threats. And what you're going to have to do, what I simply do to just kind of brush up on tactics and sharpen your visualization and your vision over the board, is just do a lot of tactics. And especially during or right before a tournament, even during a tournament, it's good to constantly just do some tactics. It keeps you sharp, it keeps you alert, and it stops you from blundering as much. But I think just with experience, and also if you're blundering a lot, it's good to play some online games. And I'm not talking about Bullet or Blitz without increment. We're talking about actual Blitz, and analyzing your game after it as well. Why is Alekhine not played very often, considering that it creates serious imbalances? So Alekhine is e4, knight f6. We can take a look at that. I would say that black isn't really following the opening principles, and they obviously watched my lectures on opening principles and then decided to completely discard the Alekhine altogether. I'm obviously joking, and I guess there are some very strong chances for white. I mean, black loses the center, first of all. We did analyze a game last week with the Alekhine. We had some c4. Okay, there's c4 and like this. I know there's this line, but there are a number of lines also like this. I mean, it's not unplayable. It's just not popular, my guess. e4, d4 at white. e4, quicker development. Statistically speaking, it allows for more tactical positions, and I just genuinely enjoy e4 a lot better, a lot more. And you can get your king saved very quickly. Best defense against d4. I don't know if there is an answer for that question, but if someone plays d4 against you, the best way to counter it is d5, creating the static pawn structure, and then c4, e6. Why I try to avoid c6 is if they exchange on d5, you want to be able to keep this diagonal open for the bishop, because at some stage you'll have to play e6. Then it's better to just start off with e6. c4, e6, and then knight c3, knight f6, and so on. So that if they do take, you'll just take back with the pawn, and then you'll play c6, defending the pawn, and be able to develop the bishop normally. So there's that. Alternatively, if they continue like this, you can play Tarash, like this. Or you could play the Slav with c6. But what you want to try and do is you just want to equalize, first of all. With the black pieces, you just want to try and how to equalize is just to develop normally, don't blunder, keep control in the center, make sure that white doesn't control the center completely, and so on. You're stuck between 2000, 2100 at Lichess. How can I pull over my rating? How to develop your rating? Analyze your games. So if you're stuck at 2000 at the moment, it often means you're either playing the wrong time control to analyze your games, or just try to see where you're going wrong. And I mean, there are so many resources online you could use to improve. There's coachess.com that you can check out. I know that all the coaches there have some kind of video that you can check out on their profile. And also Chess24 has a bunch of amazing videos, and Chessable has free online courses, so that's cool. Sure. Okay. What am I missing? If you want people to listen to me, I must move my plant out of frame. Remember, Planty feeds me information, so technically you're listening to Planty. No glamdring, you can't do tactics while it's your opponent's turn, OTB. What do I think about the Danish gambit? What is the Danish gambit again? I forgot. Oh, the Polish was b4. What is the Danish? This is me speed reading right now. What other openings would you recommend to lower rated players besides the Italian? I would also recommend looking at the Rilo pairs. It's a good start. You could also play... Ooh, Evans Gambit is pretty good. So Evans Gambit is also e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5. And then you play b4. So it's also just like a gambit to fight for the center here. Bishop a5, castle, knight f6, rook e1, and castle d4. Is it? No. No, 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 no. What's the move here? I'm not too clued up on the theory. Knight a3. Interesting. Okay, so I mean, look into the Evans Gambit. It's definitely something to check out. I know Evans Gambit is good to some extent. I can't boast my knowledge of the theory, unfortunately. Wish I was stuck at 2000. Must be nice, right? I think it's a lot easier to gain rating on Lichess than it is on other platforms. I'm sure on Chess24 you would also have something like 2000. The Catalan? Then move over. No. The Catalan is good, I guess. Oof. Polish is e4, e5, d4. Oh, what is the... Ah, the Danish is e4, e5, d4, takes d4, c3, 6, bishop c4. That's interesting. E4, e5, d4 takes, c3 takes, and then knight takes, right? Pawn takes. No, you take with a knight. Take with a pawn? No, you take with a knight. Bishop c4. Oh no, you don't take. Take c3, bishop c4 takes. So you give up 2 pawns? Hectic. Okay. Goodness. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, there's so many things you can try to do. So recap: control the center with your pawns, but control the center generally. Get your pieces towards the center. You want to avoid passivity, such as bishop e2. I mean, if this is the best square for your bishop, then by all means. But if it is not, then try to reach, without blundering your pieces. You want to avoid putting your pieces on the side of the board because of course that is weak. You're also limiting its range. You want to go towards the center where it can do more attacking and controlling of central squares, as well as potential attacks later on. You also want to get your king safe as soon as possible before attacking or opening up the center. If your opponent's king is already castled, you do not want to go ahead and open up the center while your king is still idle in the center, because this is going to be terrible. You may see castling as like a waste of a move, but honestly, you cannot go wrong with getting your king safe and your rooks connected. So beyond getting the minor pieces out, at some point you'll move your queen forward, maybe 1 square, 2 squares, doesn't really matter, but the whole point is you want to connect your rooks. So after castling, connect your rooks where your rooks can see each other and bring them towards the center. All right. But other than that, it was a huge pleasure being here with you today, guys. And yeah, I think throughout the week there's going to be a bunch of lectures on the opening, different ideas, openings for white, openings for black. So I will definitely see you again soon. And to those of you who are playing in the World Online School Chess Tournament, a huge good luck with your preparation. And I know that's creeping up quite quickly. It's happening in less than 2 months, or 2 months. November? December? Anyway, I'll see you guys really soon.